I was born into wealth, but I learned very early that luxury and freedom are not the same thing. My name is Amina, and I am 32 years old as I tell you this story. For most of my life, people believed I had everything a woman could ever desire. I lived behind palace walls in Saudi Arabia, surrounded by marble floors, chandeliers that shimmered like captured stars, and servants who anticipated my needs before I spoke. From the outside, my life looked blessed, protected, chosen by God Himself. But inside me, there was a silence so heavy, it felt like suffocation. I grew up believing fear was the beginning of faith. My earliest memories are not of laughter, but of correction, of being reminded to sit properly, speak softly, obey immediately. My mother would adjust my veil even when no men were present, telling me that Allah watched constantly, that angels recorded every thought, every hesitation, every hidden doubt. As a child, I tried to imagine those angels hovering near me, writing down my mistakes, and it made me terrified of my own mind. I learned to hide emotions before I even understood them. Questions were dangerous because questions suggested dissatisfaction, and dissatisfaction suggested weak faith. By the time I was 10, I knew how to recite long passages perfectly, yet I never felt the closeness to God that others described. During prayer, I watched the adults around me cry, while I felt only pressure to perform correctly. I believed something was wrong with me. I begged Allah silently to fix whatever emptiness lived in my chest, but nothing changed. Years passed in routines shaped by honor and expectation. Tutors educated me privately. Religious teachers emphasized obedience above understanding. Every lesson circled back to the same truth. A woman protects her family through submission. My future, though never openly discussed, was already decided long before I became an adult. At family gatherings, older women would smile knowingly and speak about marriage as if it were destiny rather than choice. I smiled back because that was what good daughters did. Inside, however, I felt like an observer watching someone else's life unfold. Nights became my only refuge. I would stand near the tall windows of my room overlooking Riyadh's glowing skyline and wonder if anyone else felt alone while surrounded by so much beauty. Sometimes I whispered prayers that did not sound like the formal Arabic I had memorized. I spoke in my own language, just asking simple questions. Are you real? Do you see me, not just my obedience? The silence that followed always felt endless. Still, I continued performing the role expected of me because fear is a powerful teacher. When I turned 26, my father summoned me to his private study. The moment I entered, I sensed the seriousness in the air. That room was where decisions were made, not discussed. He looked proud, almost relieved, as he told me my marriage had been arranged. My heart pounded loudly enough that I worried he could hear it. I asked who the man was, though I already knew my opinion would not matter. He told me the name of a prince connected to powerful families and respected religious authorities. Everyone later congratulated me as if I had won a great honor. My relatives praised Allah for elevating our family's status. My mother cried tears of joy while adjusting my jewelry, telling me I was chosen for greatness. I tried to mirror their happiness, but inside, I felt something closing around me. Something invisible, yet undeniable. Engagement celebrations filled the palace with music and laughter, yet I felt strangely detached from my own life. One evening during the festivities, I slipped away into a quiet hallway lined with mirrors. When I looked at my reflection, I saw a woman dressed perfectly, yet staring back with exhausted eyes. I realized I did not know who she truly was, beyond expectations placed upon her. That realization frightened me more than any religious warning ever had. If you are listening right now, and you have ever smiled while feeling completely unseen, then you understand the loneliness I carried. Before I continue, I want to ask you gently to subscribe, like, comment, and share this story so others who feel trapped in silence might discover hope the way I eventually did. At that time, I had no idea how important testimonies would become to my survival. A week later, I met the man who would become my husband. He entered the room surrounded by authority, calm and controlled, speaking politely but without warmth. His gaze studied me carefully, as if measuring obedience rather than discovering a person. Everyone praised his discipline and devotion. I nodded respectfully, telling myself this was honor, this was destiny, this was God's plan. Yet deep inside, a quiet unease began to grow, a whisper I tried desperately to ignore. I convinced myself that marriage would bring purpose and peace, that the emptiness inside me would finally disappear. 3 months later, beneath bright chandeliers and sacred recitations, I accepted the marriage contract. Applause filled the hall, prayers were spoken, and my future sealed itself in a single moment. As I stood beside the prince, smiling for guests and cameras, I felt something I could not explain. Not fear exactly, but the sensation of a door closing behind me. I did not yet know that the palace I was entering would become my prison, or that the God I thought I understood was about to reveal himself in a way that would change everything I believed about truth, freedom, and love forever. The first weeks of marriage felt like walking through a dream that someone else had designed for me. Every morning, I woke beneath silk curtains embroidered with gold thread, sunlight filtering softly through enormous palace windows, and servants waiting quietly outside my door for instructions I was never allowed to give myself. I told myself adjustment required patience. Everyone said marriage demanded sacrifice, especially for women raised to uphold honor. I repeated those words like prayer beads in my mind, hoping they would eventually feel true. My husband was respectful in public, attentive when others watched, but distant the moment we were alone. Conversations between us rarely moved beyond formal questions about schedules or family expectations. He spoke often about reputation, loyalty, and discipline, but never about feelings or dreams. At first, I assumed shyness explained his behavior. I tried to please him by becoming quieter, more careful, more perfect. Yet the more I adapted, the further away he seemed to drift. The palace itself was enormous, yet my world began shrinking almost immediately. Certain corridors required permission. Certain doors remained locked. Guards followed discreetly, but constantly, their presence explained as protection. My phone usage became monitored under the excuse of security protocols. Friends I once spoke with freely suddenly became unavailable, their calls redirected through assistants who rarely connected us. Loneliness settled over me slowly, like desert dust covering everything without notice. Religious expectations intensified after the wedding. I was reminded daily that a wife's obedience reflected her faith. Visiting scholars lectured about devotion and submission, while I sat silently beside my husband, feeling more like an example than a person. I noticed something strange about him during those gatherings. At least while others discussed spiritual matters passionately, he appeared distracted, almost irritated, as if faith were a performance he tolerated rather than embraced. At night, he often disappeared into private rooms or slept for unusually long hours, sometimes remaining in bed well past noon. Servants spoke carefully around the subject, avoiding explanation. When I gently asked if he was unwell, he dismissed my concern with cold politeness. "You think too much," he said once, not looking at me. Those words echoed painfully, because thinking was the one thing I had always been warned against. Days blended together in controlled routine. I dressed beautifully, but had nowhere meaningful to go. I attended dinners where conversations floated around politics and alliances, while I smiled silently. I began to realize marriage had not expanded my life, but reduced it. I was no longer a daughter preparing for a future. I was an ornament representing stability. Flashbacks from childhood returned unexpectedly during quiet moments. I remembered teachers warning that questioning authority invited chaos. I remembered sermons describing obedience as protection from spiritual danger. Those teachings now felt less comforting and more like invisible chains tightening around my thoughts. One afternoon, I attempted to walk alone in the palace garden, hoping fresh air might calm the growing anxiety inside me. A guard respectfully stepped into my path and informed me that outdoor movement required prior approval. His tone remained polite, yet the message was clear. I returned inside feeling smaller than ever. That evening, I confronted my husband gently, asking why so many restrictions surrounded me. He listened without expression before explaining that visibility brought risk and that my responsibility was to remain secure and respectful. His words sounded reasonable, yet something beneath them felt possessive rather than protective. After that conversation, he grew colder. Meals were often taken separately. Weeks passed without meaningful dialogue between us. Silence filled the spaces where companionship should have existed. I began experiencing sleepless nights, lying awake while palace lights dimmed and distant footsteps echoed through hallways. My thoughts wandered to forbidden questions again. Why did devotion feel like fear? Why did marriage feel like disappearance? I buried those thoughts quickly, whispering prayers for forgiveness, but they returned stronger each time. One evening, while attempting to message an old friend, my phone suddenly froze. Minutes later, a servant knocked and politely requested the device for security updates. Hours passed, then a full day. Finally, an assistant informed me that personal communication would now be managed through official channels for my safety. I felt a sharp panic rise in my chest. My last private connection to the outside world had vanished without discussion. I realized then that I could not call anyone freely, could not speak honestly, could not even reach my own family without supervision. The palace walls seemed closer that night, the air heavier. I sat alone on the edge of my bed, listening to distant doors closing somewhere in the residence, in understanding for the first time that marriage had transformed my life into something carefully controlled. I was not a partner sharing a future. I was a responsibility being managed. As darkness settled over the palace, I felt a quiet realization form inside me, one I was afraid to fully acknowledge. I had entered this marriage believing it would complete my purpose, but instead, it had taken my voice. And as I stared at the closed door of my room, hearing guards shift positions outside, a frightening thought surfaced that refused to disappear. I was no longer simply lonely. I was trapped, and I did not yet know how far that captivity would go or how much of myself I would lose before anyone noticed I was slowly disappearing inside the life everyone else called blessed. Days stopped feeling like days and became measurements of endurance. Some morning prayers, silent meals, supervised walks through identical corridors, evenings alone beneath ceilings too high to feel human. The palace that once impressed me now felt endless in a suffocating way. Every polished surface reflecting a version of myself I barely recognized. Guards no longer pretended their presence was casual. They stood outside doors openly, their radios whispering coded conversations whenever I moved. At first, I told myself this was normal for royal life, but deep inside I knew something had changed. My husband rarely visited my chambers anymore. When he did, exhaustion hung over him like a shadow. He slept heavily, sometimes mid-conversation, leaving sentences unfinished as if reality itself bored him. I watched him one night, wondering how someone surrounded by power could seem so empty. Hassan, the thought frightened me because I recognized the same emptiness growing inside me. Sleep abandoned me completely. Nights stretched endlessly, while silence pressed against my ears. I began pacing my room, counting steps from wall to wall just to feel movement. Anxiety tightened around my chest without warning. I remembered childhood lessons about patience during trials, yet no amount of prayer quieted the restlessness inside me. Instead, memories surfaced, flashbacks of sitting cross-legged as a girl, while teachers described punishment awaiting those who doubted. I remembered nodding obediently, terrified of disappointing God. Now those warnings echoed differently. If faith brought peace, why did I feel constant fear? One evening, I attempted to leave my wing of the palace without requesting permission, so driven by desperation for human interaction. Before I reached the staircase, 2 guards gently blocked my path. Their politeness could not hide the finality in their eyes. One informed me that movement restrictions had increased for my safety. I returned to my room without argument, but something broke quietly inside me. The door closed behind me with a soft click that sounded louder than any shout. From that moment, I understood the truth I had resisted naming. I was confined. Time lost meaning after that realization. Meals arrived on trays. Conversations disappeared. Even servants spoke minimally, careful not to linger. I began talking aloud, just to hear a voice, sometimes reciting childhood memories to remind myself I still existed beyond these walls. My thoughts wandered toward forbidden curiosity. During Islamic lessons growing up, Isa Jesus had been mentioned briefly as a prophet, respected yet distant. I remembered a teacher once saying Christians misunderstood him, that their beliefs were corrupted. At the time, I accepted that explanation without question. Now, alone in endless silence, I found myself wondering why his name stirred unexpected warmth instead of fear. I scolded myself immediately, whispering apologies to Allah for entertaining such thoughts. Yet curiosity returned night after night, gentle but persistent. Insomnia intensified until exhaustion blurred reality. One night I sat on the floor beside my bed, knees pulled close, tears falling without dramatic reason. I was simply tired of pretending strength. Words escaped my mouth before I could stop them. God, if you are real, whoever you are, please see me. The prayer shocked me because it lacked formality. It was not Arabic recitation or memorized phrases. It was raw, uncertain, almost desperate. For a moment, nothing happened. The room remained quiet, except for my breathing. Yet something inside me softened, as if speaking honestly lifted a weight I had carried for years. I stayed there, whispering fragmented thoughts, unsure whom I addressed, only knowing I could not continue living inside silence. Hours later, as exhaustion finally pulled me towards sleep, a faint sound reached my ears from the hallway. Footsteps approached slowly, deliberate and heavy. My body tensed instantly. Late-night visits never brought comfort. Shadows moved beneath the door as someone paused outside. My heart pounded so loudly, I feared it could be heard through the walls. A key turned gently in the lock, then stopped, as if whoever stood there reconsidered entering. I held my breath, frozen between fear and anticipation. After several seconds, the footsteps retreated, fading down the corridor until silence returned. I remained awake long after, shaken by the reminder that my privacy existed only by permission. Lying in darkness, I stared at the ceiling and realized how fragile my sense of identity had become. I no longer knew who controlled my life, my future, even my thoughts. Yet beneath the fear, another feeling began emerging. Small, but undeniable. The strange peace I felt after that honest prayer lingered faintly, like the first hint of dawn before sunrise. I did not understand it, and part of me resisted acknowledging it. But something had shifted. For the first time since entering the palace, I sensed that maybe God was not as distant as I had always believed. Still, uncertainty terrified me, If my thoughts were discovered, consequences would follow. I turned onto my side, pulling the blanket tightly around me, whispering one final question into the darkness. Are you listening? The silence that followed felt different from before. Not empty, but waiting, as if an answer was moving toward me, slowly, quietly, through doors I could not yet see opening. Exhaustion finally claimed me sometime before dawn, pulling me into sleep so deep it felt like falling beneath water. I remember darkness first, then light emerging slowly, not harsh like sunlight, but warm and alive, surrounding everything without casting shadows. In the dream, I stood in an open space I could not recognize, neither desert nor palace, yet somehow familiar. The air felt peaceful in a way I had never experienced while awake. My heart, usually tight with anxiety, felt weightless. Then I realized someone stood a short distance in front of me. I could not see his face clearly, because light seemed to flow from him rather than shine upon him. It did not hurt my eyes. Instead, it calmed me. I felt no fear, only recognition, as though my soul understood before my mind could. He spoke my name gently, Amina. The sound carried compassion so deep that tears filled my eyes instantly. No one had ever spoken my name like that, without expectation or judgment. I wanted to ask who he was, but words failed me. He stepped closer, and with each step the heaviness I carried for years seemed to dissolve. You are not forgotten, he said, his voice steady and kind. I felt seen completely, every hidden thought exposed, yet loved. There was no accusation, no demand for perfection, only peace. I woke suddenly, sitting upright in bed, breath trembling. Morning light filtered through the curtains, but the calm from the dream remained stronger than reality. For several minutes, I could not move. My room looked the same, yet something inside me had changed. The fear that usually greeted me each morning was absent. In its place rested quiet assurance I could not explain. I told myself it was only a dream born from loneliness, yet my heart resisted that explanation. The words echoed clearly in my memory. You are not forgotten. Throughout the day, I struggled to focus on routine. The servants noticed my distraction, asking politely if I felt unwell. I nodded, unable to describe what had happened. Part of me feared even thinking about the dream too deeply. Another part felt drawn to it irresistibly. That evening, curiosity overcame caution. Hidden inside a drawer, I kept a small tablet given to me months earlier, but rarely checked by security. My hands trembled as I turned it on. I hesitated before typing a single word into the search bar. Isa. Information appeared quickly. References I had heard before, descriptions familiar yet incomplete. Then I saw something unexpected. Passages from the Injil, the Christian Bible. My heartbeat quickened. I knew exploring such material could bring serious consequences, yet the memory of the dream urged me forward. I opened a verse translated into Arabic. Come to me, so all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. I stared at the words, stunned by their tenderness. Rest was never promised, in my understanding of faith, only obedience. Another verse appeared. I have called you by name. You are mine. Tears blurred the screen. The similarity to the dream unsettled me deeply. I quickly lowered the device, listening for footsteps, convinced someone might burst into the room. Silence reassured me temporarily. I continued reading cautiously, discovering descriptions of God as Father, loving, and near. Each sentence felt both comforting and dangerous, challenging everything I had been taught. My mind argued fiercely. This cannot be true. You are being misled. Yet my heart felt alive in a way I had never known. The internal conflict exhausted me more than confinement ever had. Days passed with secret searches late at night. I cleared browsing history repeatedly, terrified of discovery. Every sound outside my door sent panic through me. One evening, while reading quietly beneath blankets, a sudden notification flashed across the screen, indicating system monitoring activity. Fear surged instantly. I shut the tablet off and hid it beneath a cushion, just as footsteps approached my room. A guard knocked lightly, informing me technicians were conducting routine digital inspections throughout the palace. My throat tightened as I nodded calmly, pretending indifference. After he left, my hands shook uncontrollably. I realized how close I had come to exposure. That night, I lay awake wrestling with myself. If the dream truly came from God, why would seeking understanding feel like betrayal? Yet if it was deception, why did peace accompany it? Questions circled endlessly until exhaustion forced my eyes closed again. Before sleep claimed me, I whispered into the darkness, unsure who listened. If you are the one from my dream, show me truth. The words felt dangerous, yet honest. Somewhere deep inside, curiosity had grown stronger than fear. And although palace walls still surrounded me, something unseen had begun opening within my heart. A door I had never known existed, leading toward answers I both longed for and feared would change my life forever. After the dream, nights became the only time I truly felt alive. Daylight still belonged to expectation and surveillance, but darkness carried possibility. I waited patiently each evening until footsteps faded and palace corridors settled into silence. Only then did I retrieve the hidden tablet, start wrapping myself in blankets to conceal its faint glow. My hands no longer trembled as violently when I opened the Bible passages, yet fear remained a constant companion, sitting beside me like an unseen witness. The words I read began reaching places inside me that years of religious instruction had never touched. One night, I listened to an audio reading through small headphones I hid beneath my pillow. A calm voice spoke about forgiveness, about love extended even to enemies. I froze when I heard the words, "God is love." The sentence felt almost forbidden. Love had never been the center of faith in my experience. Obedience had. Punishment had. Fear had. I replayed the passage again and again, trying to understand how God could desire closeness rather than control. Memories surfaced unexpectedly while I listened. I saw myself as a child reciting prayers perfectly to avoid correction, measuring devotion by accuracy instead of sincerity. I remembered crying quietly after making small mistakes, convinced God was disappointed in me. Now these new teachings described a shepherd searching for a lost sheep, with joy rather than anger. Something inside me began healing slowly, like wounds finally exposed to fresh air after years hidden beneath bandages. Yet healing brought conflict. Each night after listening, guilt crashed over me. I feared betraying my family, my upbringing, my identity. I imagined my parents' faces if they knew what I was doing. Shame whispered that I was abandoning everything sacred. I would close the tablet and pray desperately for forgiveness, promising to stop exploring. But when morning came, the emptiness returned stronger. And by nightfall, curiosity overcame fear again. The struggle between loyalty and truth exhausted me emotionally. Meanwhile, my husband's behavior grew increasingly unsettling. He avoided me almost entirely, spending long hours isolated in private chambers. When we crossed paths, irritation replaced politeness. Once he noticed dark circles beneath my eyes and asked sharply why I looked tired. I lowered my gaze, inventing explanations about insomnia. His stare lingered longer than usual, suspicious yet uninterested enough not to investigate further. After that conversation, surveillance around my wing intensified subtly. Guards rotated more frequently. Servants entered unexpectedly. Every change heightened my anxiety. Still, the peace I felt while listening to scripture became stronger than fear. One passage pierced my heart deeply. "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Freedom felt like an impossible concept within palace walls, yet something inside me believed those words personally. I began whispering them during anxious moments, repeating them silently when panic threatened to overwhelm me. The teachings about Jesus described compassion unlike anything I had imagined, touching the rejected, forgiving those who harmed him, offering rest to the weary. I realized how tired my soul truly was. One evening, overwhelmed by emotion, I removed my headphones and sat quietly on the floor. Tears flowed without restraint. For years, I had tried to earn acceptance through perfection, yet these words suggested acceptance was already given. The idea felt both beautiful and terrifying. If it were true, everything I believed about God would change. That night, tension filled the palace unusually. Raised voices echoed faintly through distant halls. Servants moved quickly, avoiding eye contact. My husband passed my doorway, accompanied by advisors, his expression tense and restless. I sensed instability growing around me, though no one explained anything. Fear returned sharply, reminding me how fragile my safety remained. I realized that if my secret discoveries were exposed during such tension, consequences could be severe. Still, as midnight approached, I found myself kneeling beside the bed, heart pounding. Words formed slowly, uncertain but sincere. I had prayed countless times before, yet this felt different. There were no memorized phrases, no formal structure, only honesty. "Jesus," I whispered softly, then testing the name aloud for the first time. The room remained silent, but my chest tightened with emotion. "If you are real, if you are truly who these words say you are, I need you." Tears fell onto my hands as years of fear surfaced. I don't know how to believe. I don't know what is right anymore, but I want truth, even if I am afraid. Speaking his name brought unexpected warmth, gentle and steady. I felt neither lightning nor dramatic vision, only quiet peace settling over my thoughts. For the first time since entering the palace, my prayer felt heard rather than performed. I remained kneeling long after, breathing slowly, sensing that something irreversible had begun. I did not yet understand the cost, but deep inside, I knew I had crossed an invisible line. The moment I whispered that prayer, my search stopped being curiosity and became relationship. As I lay down afterward, sleep came easily, carrying a calm I had never known. Yet somewhere beyond my door, unseen forces continued moving, and I sensed instinctively that the peace growing within me would soon be tested by realities outside my control. The night everything changed began like many others, wrapped in silence and uncertainty. I remember feeling unusually heavy that evening, as though invisible pressure surrounded me. The palace corridors had grown quieter over the past days, conversations fading whenever I appeared, eyes watching longer than before. Fear lingered constantly beneath my calm exterior, yet something deeper urged me to continue seeking the presence I had begun to know through whispered prayers. After midnight, I sat alone on the floor beside my bed, knees drawn close to my chest. The tablet lay untouched nearby. For the first time, I did not feel the need to read anything. Words seemed unnecessary. My heart carried too much weight. Memories flooded me. Childhood expectations, my wedding day, the locked doors, the loneliness that followed. I felt grief for the girl I once was, obedient and hopeful, unaware of how confined her future would become. Tears slipped down quietly as exhaustion overwhelmed me. "Jesus," I whispered again, the name no longer foreign on my lips. "I don't know what to do anymore. My voice trembled. "If you are truly here, please help me." The room remained still, yet the atmosphere shifted subtly. At first, I thought it was imagination caused by emotional fatigue. Then a deep calm began spreading through my chest, unlike anything I had felt before. It was not excitement or relief, but peace, steady, warm, and powerful. My breathing slowed naturally. The constant tension I carried in my shoulders disappeared, as though lifted away. I opened my eyes fully, suddenly aware that fear itself had vanished. For years, fear had lived inside me like a permanent resident, shaping every thought and decision. Now, it was simply gone. I looked around the room, expecting to see someone standing there, but nothing appeared unusual. Still, the presence felt undeniable. I sensed love surrounding me, not distant or symbolic, but personal, intentional. My heart pounded, not from panic, but awe. Words formed in my mind without sound. "You are safe." The message carried certainty deeper than logic. I began crying uncontrollably, not from sadness, but release. Every hidden pain surfaced at once, the loneliness, and the pressure to be perfect. The years spent believing God was always disappointed in me. In that moment, I felt completely known and completely accepted. I lowered my head to the floor, overwhelmed by emotion. "Why would you love me?" I whispered. The question came from genuine confusion. I had never believed love could exist without conditions. Yet the peace surrounding me answered without words. I understood suddenly that nothing I had done earned this moment. It was given freely. Images flashed through my mind like memories I had never lived. A cross, open arms, forgiveness offered even in suffering. I remembered verses I had listened to only nights before, about grace, about burdens lifted. Now those words felt alive rather than distant teachings. The fear of punishment that shaped my childhood dissolved completely. Instead, and I felt invited into relationship, into belonging. Time seemed suspended. I do not know how long I remained there, crying and whispering gratitude through broken sentences. My entire understanding of God transformed in that quiet room. He was not distant, waiting to judge. He was near, reaching toward me even when I doubted. At some point, I spoke aloud words that surprised even me. "I believe you, Jesus. I don't understand everything, but I believe you are real." Saying it felt like stepping into light after years in darkness. A warmth spread through my chest, filling spaces once occupied by anxiety. For the first time since childhood, my mind felt still. No accusations echoed. No fear demanded perfection. Only peace remained. I realized then that something irreversible had happened inside me. I could not return to who I was before. Even if circumstances around me remained unchanged, my heart had crossed into new life. The thought frightened me briefly, because I understood the danger such belief carried within my world. Yet courage rose quietly beneath the fear, rooted in the love I had just experienced. I lay back against the bed, tears drying on my face, overwhelmed, yet calm. Sleep came gently, unlike the restless nights before. As consciousness faded, one decision formed clearly within me. I would no longer deny what I had encountered. Whatever consequences followed, I could not pretend this peace was imaginary. Morning eventually arrived, sunlight touching the curtains as usual, but everything looked different. The palace remained a prison physically, yet inside I felt free. The fear that once controlled me no longer held authority. I knew challenges would come, perhaps even suffering, but the presence I experienced gave me strength I had never possessed. Standing by the window, I whispered softly, "I am yours." The words felt both surrender and victory. Beyond the walls, God still watched, rules still existed, and danger still waited. Yet something eternal had begun within me that no locked door could contain. I understood then that salvation was not escape from difficulty, but freedom within it. And I chose silently, firmly, never to turn away from the one who had entered my darkness and replaced it with light. For several days after that night, I carried peace like a secret flame hidden within my chest. Nothing outward changed, yet everything felt different. I walked through palace halls, aware of surveillance, aware of expectations, but no longer ruled by fear. Even silence felt less oppressive because I sensed I was no longer alone. I prayed quietly throughout the day, not with memorized words, but with simple thoughts directed toward Jesus. Sometimes it was only gratitude, sometimes questions. Each time I felt heard. That calm, however, did not go unnoticed for long. One afternoon, a guard entered my room without warning while I sat near the window. His eyes moved slowly across the space, searching. Behind him stood another man holding a small device used for digital inspection. My heartbeat quickened instantly. They spoke politely but firmly, requesting access to all personal electronics for routine verification. I nodded calmly, though panic surged beneath my composure. I handed over my visible devices, that silently praying they would not discover the hidden tablet concealed beneath folded clothing inside a drawer. Minutes passed like hours while they examined everything carefully. The guard's expression hardened slightly as he reviewed activity logs. He exchanged a glance with his partner before returning the devices without explanation. When they left, relief washed over me briefly, but unease remained. Something in their behavior suggested suspicion rather than routine. That evening, tension spread through the palace like invisible smoke. Servants avoided conversation. Doors closed quickly when I approached. I sensed conversations about me happening behind walls. Late that night, I was summoned unexpectedly to a private chamber I rarely entered. My hands trembled as I followed a guard through dim corridors. Inside the room sat my husband, two family elders, and a religious scholar whose presence alone filled me with dread. Their faces carried seriousness that confirmed my fears. The door closed behind me with finality. My husband spoke first, his voice controlled but cold. He asked simple questions about my daily activities, my sleep, my prayers. I answered carefully, choosing words that revealed little. Then the scholar leaned forward, his eyes sharp. He asked whether I had been exposed to foreign religious material. The question struck like thunder. My throat tightened. Silence stretched painfully. Memories of childhood warnings flooded back. Stories of punishment, dishonor, disgrace. Fear whispered that survival required denial. Yet the peace inside me remained steady, urging honesty. I lowered my gaze, unable to lie completely. "I have been searching for understanding," I said quietly. The room erupted with overlapping voices. Accusations followed immediately. Confusion, manipulation, spiritual attack. My husband's expression shifted from irritation to anger. They demanded explanations, quoting teachings I had memorized since childhood. Insisting doubt itself was rebellion. The scholar spoke firmly about consequences for straying from truth, describing repentance as my only protection. Their words once would have crushed me completely. Now they felt distant, unable to penetrate the calm within my heart. I listened respectfully, yet something inside refused to retreat. When they demanded I renounce any interest in Jesus, silence filled my chest. My mind raced through possible outcomes, loss of family, harsher confinement, danger I could not fully imagine. Fear pressed heavily, urging compliance. But another voice, gentle yet unwavering, reminded me of the peace I had experienced. Denying it felt impossible. My hands shook as I spoke. "I cannot deny what I have experienced," I said softly. The words shocked even me. Gasps filled the room. My husband stood abruptly, anger breaking through his composure. He accused me of dishonoring him, of bringing shame upon our family. The scholar's tone hardened, warning me about eternal consequences. Emotional pressure intensified. Reminders of loyalty, threats disguised as concern. Promises of forgiveness if I corrected my path immediately. Tears filled my eyes, not from regret, but sorrow. I realized they truly believed fear could restore obedience. Flashbacks surfaced of younger versions of myself submitting instantly to authority. Desperate for approval. That girl would have apologized quickly, but the woman standing there had encountered love stronger than fear. I am not trying to dishonor anyone, I whispered. I only want truth. My refusal deepened their anger. After hours of confrontation, the decision was made without my input. I would remain under stricter supervision until proper guidance corrected my thinking. Guards escorted me back to my room, now locked from the outside. Windows were secured. Personal freedoms disappeared entirely. Isolation returned heavier than before, yet strangely, it did not break me. Sitting alone in the dim room, I expected despair to overwhelm me. Instead, peace remained steady, reminding me I had not lost everything. I had gained something eternal. Still, uncertainty lingered, so I did not know how far they would go to force my compliance. As night deepened, footsteps echoed outside my door more frequently, confirming constant surveillance. I knelt beside the bed, whispering through tears, "Jesus, give me strength." Despite confinement tightening around me, hope refused to fade. And as I lay down, listening to locks securing my prison, I understood that choosing truth had begun a battle I could not escape, yet one I no longer feared facing alone. I woke to silence so complete, it felt like the palace itself was holding its breath. For a moment, I did not know where I was. The heavy curtains blocked the sun, and the room smelled faintly of incense and polished wood. My body felt strangely calm, yet my heart raced as if I had run for miles. The dream lingered around me like mist, refusing to fade. I sat upright slowly, afraid that any sudden movement would erase what I had seen. In the dream, the man in white had spoken again, clearer than before. He had not shouted. He had not threatened. He simply looked at me with unbearable compassion and said, "You are not forgotten." Those words echoed louder than any sermon I had ever heard. My hands trembled as I whispered them aloud, testing whether they belonged to reality or imagination. "You are not forgotten." Tears filled my eyes before I understood why. All my life, I had believed God was distant, watching from judgment, measuring obedience and failure. Yet this presence felt near, personal, almost grieving with me. I pressed my palms against my face, terrified and comforted at once. Outside my door, footsteps passed, reminding me that nothing in my physical world had changed. I was still confined, still monitored, still expected to obey. But something inside me had shifted, like a locked door quietly opening. I tried to pray the familiar Islamic prayers, hoping routine would restore certainty. Yet the words felt hollow, slipping from my lips without meaning. Instead, another sentence rose within me uninvited. "Jesus, are you real?" The question frightened me so deeply that I covered my mouth as if someone might hear it through the walls. I had never spoken his name this way before. Yet peace followed the question, gentle and undeniable. Later that morning, a servant brought tea, avoiding eye contact as always. When she left, I noticed something strange on the bedside table. A phone that was not mine. My pulse quickened. It must have been forgotten by a guard, or placed there by mistake. I hesitated for several minutes, staring at it as though it were dangerous. Finally, curiosity overcame fear. I unlocked it easily, There was no password. My hands shook as I opened the browser. Without planning to, I typed one word: Jesus. Instantly, articles, sermons, and verses appeared. My breathing grew shallow. I felt as though I were crossing a forbidden border. One link led to an online Bible. I had never read one before. The first verse I saw said, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." I froze. Rest. That was the word my soul had been craving, but could never name. Tears blurred the screen as I read it again and again. It felt written directly to me, to the exhausted girl hidden behind royal walls. A sudden knock on the door made me jump, nearly dropping the phone. Panic surged through me. If anyone discovered this, her punishment would be inevitable. I hid the device beneath the mattress, just as the guard entered to check the room. He glanced around briefly, suspicious as always, then left without speaking. When the door closed, my knees gave way, and I sank to the floor. Fear battled hope inside me. I realized I stood between two worlds, one demanding silence, the other calling me by name. That evening, as darkness filled the palace corridors, I retrieved the phone again. I searched secretly for testimonies of others who claimed to meet Jesus in dreams. To my shock, there were many. People from backgrounds like mine, people who risked everything. Their stories felt impossible, yet familiar. Each one stirred courage I did not know I possessed. For the first time since my imprisonment began, I felt less alone. I whispered into the quiet room, "If you are truly there, show me what to do." The air felt warm, almost alive, and a calm certainty settled over me. I did not yet understand salvation or faith, but I sensed guidance beginning. Outside, palace lights glittered like a cage of stars, yet inside my heart, a different light was rising. And as sleep finally overtook me, I knew the next step would demand a decision I could no longer avoid. The morning arrived heavy with tension. I was summoned to the main hall, escorted by two guards whose expressions gave away nothing yet communicated everything. The grand doors loomed before me, carved with intricate designs that had always seemed beautiful but now felt like walls of judgment. Inside, my husband sat with an imam and several elders, whose eyes pierced me as I entered. The room smelled faintly of oud, heavy and oppressive, always mingling with the sharp scent of incense burned for ritual obedience. My heart pounded, but the calm from recent nights refused to leave me. I had rehearsed nothing. I only knew one thing. I could not deny what I had experienced. My husband's voice broke the silence first, cold and controlled. "You will repent publicly. You will return to the path of your family and faith." I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of centuries of expectation pressing on me. I nodded, hiding the tremor in my hands, pretending to consider compliance. Then the imam leaned forward, speaking directly to my eyes. "You have strayed from the only truth. Deny this heresy now, or face consequences eternal and temporal." Every word threatened to crush me. Memories flooded back, childhood obedience, whispered warnings. The countless nights I had prayed out of fear rather than hope. Yet the memory of peace I had felt in the darkness and the love I had sensed in the night refused to leave me. My lips parted, my voice quiet but unwavering. I cannot deny Jesus. I cannot turn away from what he has shown me. I cannot go back to fear as my guide. A sharp gasp echoed from one of the elders. My husband's expression darkened, eyes narrowing with anger. "Do you defy me, your family, your faith, and your duty?" he demanded. I held his gaze steadily, feeling my own power rise quietly from the love I had discovered. I defy fear, yes, but I do not defy God. He has called me to truth, and in him I am free. Free from shame, free from terror, free from the bondage of obedience without understanding. Whispers broke out across the hall. The Imam slammed his palm on the table, voice rising. "Repent! For the sake of your soul, repent now!" My pulse raced, yet I felt no terror, only clarity. I breathed slowly, steadying myself, knowing that this was the moment I had been preparing for silently in my heart. I am not angry. I do not hate. I forgive the fear that has kept us bound, I said, voice trembling only slightly. But I cannot deny what I have found in Jesus. His love is real, and I must follow him, even if it costs me everything here. Silence fell suddenly. The weight of my words seemed to hang in the air, pressing against every ornate wall. For a moment, I feared I had overstepped, that I had invited punishment beyond imagining. Then I saw confusion flicker in my husband's eyes, disbelief in the Imam's. Their certainty, which had seemed unshakable, wavered before me. I realized that truth spoken with courage could unsettle even the most rigid authority. Yet the moment was fragile, delicate, and dangerous. An elder stepped forward, voice low but stern, declaring that my defiance could not be tolerated. My heart sank slightly, knowing I had not escaped consequence. They would ensure I remained confined, perhaps more strictly than ever. Guards moved to close the doors behind me, their presence heavy with warning. But as I stood, I did not shrink. I could feel something inside me larger than fear. Something eternal anchored me. I glanced at my husband, a mixture of grief, rage, and confusion in his face. I did not respond with anger. I did not argue further. I simply stood in the calm truth of what I had encountered. For the first time, and I understood that love could be stronger than authority, and peace stronger than intimidation. As the guards escorted me back to my private chambers, I knew the path ahead would be uncertain. I would face stricter confinement, perhaps betrayal, perhaps continued isolation. But the fear that once ruled me no longer had power. I had spoken truth with courage. I had claimed the peace I had found. And in that, I felt free in a way that no walls, no authority, no expectation could touch. That night, alone, I knelt beside my bed and whispered a prayer, thanking him for the strength to speak honestly, for the love that had carried me through doubt, and for the courage to choose faith over comfort, truth over fear. I understood clearly that my journey was only beginning. The palace could not contain my heart, the chains could not bind my spirit, and the love I had found in Jesus could not be undone. Whatever trials awaited, I was no longer the girl who trembled in silence. I was a daughter of the one who had entered my darkness and given me light, and no human authority could take that away. The days following the confrontation passed in a blur of quiet tension. My room had become a fortress. Locks, guards, and strict surveillance ensured I moved only when permitted. At first, the isolation threatened to break me. The palace seemed larger, emptier, and lonelier than ever. Yet each night, as I whispered prayers to Jesus, a deep calm anchored my soul. I began to understand that freedom was no longer a matter of physical escape, but a matter of the heart. I was learning what it truly meant to live for truth, even within walls of confinement. Weeks passed, each more challenging than the last. My family's rejection weighed heavily. Messages through intermediaries reminded me daily that I had dishonored them. Yet with every whispered prayer, every verse I read secretly, I felt part of a family far greater than blood. Believers praying across continents, connected by faith, hope, and love. Through hidden messages and clandestine calls, I learned that people I would never meet were standing in the spiritual gap for me, lifting me before God. Their faith gave me courage I did not know I possessed. The moment of rescue came unexpectedly. Allies I had never seen arrived quietly, guiding me past checkpoints, past guards, through hidden passages, and out into a night sky that smelled of freedom and jasmine. I remember stepping into the air, lungs filling with real oxygen for the first time in years. The tears streamed down my face uncontrollably, mingling relief, fear, gratitude, and disbelief. The palace, with all its opulence and confinement, shrank behind me, and I realized that the life I had left was a life built on fear rather than love. In the days that followed, I was surrounded by believers who nurtured my spiritual and emotional recovery. For the first time, I experienced fellowship without judgment, love without conditions, and guidance without coercion. Trauma slowly gave way to healing, and the weight of shame lifted, replaced by gratitude and purpose. I reflected on my family, on the prince who had imprisoned me, and on the many elders and scholars who had sought to bind me to fear. In the beginning, anger surged, but it quickly softened into forgiveness. I realized that resentment would only anchor me to the past. Instead, I chose peace and prayers for those who had misunderstood me, trusting God with hearts that could not yet receive truth. My identity, once dictated by royal expectation and cultural enforcement, was now rooted in Christ. I could see clearly how love, not fear, defines worth. I began to speak with others quietly, sharing the testimony of my journey, of whispers in the dark, of dreams that led me to Him, of nights spent in prayer and discovery, and of courage that comes from knowing God's presence personally. Every story I shared became a reminder that truth carries power beyond walls and authority. In time, I understood that the palace had not been a prison for my spirit. It had been preparation. The isolation, the fear, and the confrontation had refined me, teaching me to rely on God entirely, to trust His guidance over human expectations, and to embrace the freedom found in surrender. I stand now, fully alive, fully known, and fully loved. My past no longer defines me. My choices no longer bend to fear. Jesus has restored my dignity, my identity, and my hope. To anyone watching, especially those who feel trapped by expectation, fear, or religious control, I say this: truth exists. Freedom is possible. God's love is real. Seek it, even if the cost seems unimaginable. It will transform your heart, your mind, and your life in ways no walls can contain. The palace may still exist behind me in memory, but I have learned that the ultimate freedom comes not from the absence of barriers, but from the presence of God in your soul. I am no longer alone, I am no longer afraid, and I will never deny the one who found me in my darkness and gave me light. My journey continues, not in fear, but in faith, courage, and joy, and I know that wherever life leads, His love will never leave me.